Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. We are now on day 7 of the story, which is crazy because we're only on day 23 and this story goes on for 70 days. So there's so much more of the story to go. I feel like it's not going to be as long as the beginning, because the beginning there was so much more I had to explain, but there's still so much of the story to go. And just knowing now that, you know, they're posting on YouTube is just making it harder to film, because I'm realizing, you know, it's out there. My story is out there, and it's open to anybody's opinion. I mean, for the most part, the comments have been really supportive and I'm very thankful of that, but just being honest about continuing this story and how difficult it's been. So I ended up cutting out the end part of part 6 just because I had used the official name of somebody in the government that I was talking about, and after I filmed it I decided I wasn't comfortable using anybody in the government's title for any of this story. So yeah, basically day 22 was also the day that my lawyer was trying to get the email of somebody in the government that we would be able to email directly to let them know what's going on and that the ministry is not responding. So the morning of day 23 was my colonoscopy and endoscopy, and I've had many of them before, so I wasn't that nervous. It went well for the most part, except after I woke up in the recovery area, I was quite distraught. Again, I don't want to be too TMI, but things were happening with my body and there was nobody there to help me. And I remember I ended up in tears because I was crying out and nobody was coming. And at that point, that's when my gastroenterologist came in to just check on me because she had just been in the procedure. And she saw me crying and I was explaining why. Yeah, they helped me get all cleaned up and wheeled me back to my room. By the time I got back there, my gastroenterologist had already spoken with my mother-in-law and actually shown her a video of my colon, which is crazy and gross, but just letting her see all the ulcers and all the bleeding that was happening within my colon. And at that point, she was explaining to me that Pentasa was not going to work and that we had to try Remicade. Now, like I had said in my previous video, because I had been on Remicade in the past, it was highly likely that my body might build antibodies towards this medication, and then I might go into anaphylactic shock when they gave me this medication. So I was extremely nervous about the thought of even taking Remicade again. And she was explaining how they were going to give me drugs ahead of time to hopefully counteract that, and that they would be right there beside me as they were administering it in case anything happened, and that they would shut it off. This is also the point in time when my gastroenterologist suggested that I see a psychiatrist in the hospital. She thought I was dealing with depression and anxiety and needed to be on medication for that and wanted me to consult with a psychiatrist. And I remember being extremely blunt with her that this wasn't depression, this was situational. My husband was in jail, I was in the hospital, my kids didn't have any of us, and that's, you know, that's what I was dealing with, that I didn't need any medication, that I've had anxiety in the past and I know what I'm dealing with. And I was just really strong in my feelings that I did not want to see a psychiatrist, and my mother-in-law supported me at the same time. But she was also referring to when I woke up from the colonoscopy and how I was in tears, and she just really thinks I need help. And again, I was like, I was in tears because there was nobody there to help me when I came out of that procedure, and things were happening with my body, and I had just woken up, and so that's why I was in tears at that point. And I was just trying to explain that like, I appreciate her concern, but I did not want to see a psychiatrist. Okay, day 24, I met with 2 doctors that day. So this was the first day that I met with the colorectal surgeon, and this was just basically a consult in case I was heading down the surgery route. At this point, when I met him on day 24, he was saying that, you know, he thinks Remicade is going to help me out and that we probably won't need to go down the surgery route, but he needed to meet with me nonetheless. So I had that consult, and then my gastro came in that evening and basically said we'd be starting Remicade the next day. One thing I should also note is the payments at the hospital. So when we first got admitted, we had to do like an admittance payment of some sort, even though we had hospital insurance, and that ended up coming off the bill at the end. However, because I was in the hospital for so long, my insurance tapped out. I never would have thought that, you know, it would have tapped out, but I ended up being in the hospital for so long that I exceeded the limits of what my insurance covered. So once I exceeded those limits, my insurance plan still covered a percentage of things, but not fully. So it was that point that hospital staff, it was this one guy in particular, would basically call me every day, every single day that I was in the hospital, and tell me what my bill was that day, and send me this app basically where I could enter in the credit card information and pay for that day. And I kept saying to him, because I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker, like, can I just pay a lump sum? Can we do this for, like, you know, a longer period of time? Can I give you a larger payment? Because even typing in my credit card information, even being like woken up by him and having to have this conversation about money was just becoming more and more difficult. But unfortunately, that's just how the hospital worked. So every single day I was having to find out how much I owed, receive this app, and then put in my credit card information. And on day 24 is when I had to also pay for the Remicade payment. So Remicade is $5,000 US a dose. And I was extremely nervous about Remicade. One, because I wasn't sure if I was going to react to it. I didn't know if it would work for me. And if it did work for me, it's not just a situation where you get one dose and you're fine. It's a situation where I would have another dose within 2 weeks, and then another dose within 2 weeks, and then I would probably be on one dose a month. So it would be $5,000 US each time. This is also the day where my lawyer did give me the email of the person within the government, and she had typed out the email that I was to send to this person. So I received the email and pasted it, coming from my email, to this email address of this person in the government, and sent that off. This is also the day that I found out that my mom, who's back in Canada at this point, booked tickets for my kids to come back to Canada. Which I'm very grateful for, and was extremely difficult at the time. I remember being like, no, like I might be okay. Can we just wait a little bit longer? But she made the call that it was the best decision to have them fly back to Canada, so at least they could stay with family until, you know, my husband was out of jail and I was doing better. And I just didn't want it to happen, because I kept having the hope that he was going to get out any day and that I was going to feel better and that we could all go back home with them. But the decision was made to have them fly back to Canada. My mom had also sent my father-in-law forms to have the kids fly. So basically the kids were going to fly on their own for the first leg of the trip. So from Managua to, I can't remember where it was, Texas or something, they would do that first leg by themselves, and then my mom and sister were flying out to meet them in Texas and would fly the second leg with them. So because they were flying solo, they had to have forms signed by the parents saying that was allowed. So she had forwarded them to my father-in-law, because the next day was a Wednesday, a visitation day, and he was going to see my husband. Okay, Wednesday, day 25, was the day that I ended up having Remicade, and luckily it went fine. I didn't even know, like, we were still chatting and they had started it. I was extremely nervous leading into it, but like I said, we were chatting and I hadn't even known that they had started it, which is probably good in hindsight because my anxiety would have been so high. I thought they were still hooking things up, and they stayed in the room with me. My gastroenterologist, who is such an amazing lady, stayed in the room with me just to make sure that I didn't have any reactions, and I didn't. So I got extremely lucky. I had the full dose of Remicade. I'm going to read some text messages that I sent my friend that day. Remicade is in, no reaction, thank goodness. Still bleeding. I hope it starts to work soon. I haven't eaten food in over 2 weeks. But God, I can't wait to eat something cheesy. I remember being so incredibly hungry at this point. Just IV and apple juice for pills. I'm at a complete loss with Harrison. I'm honestly concerned he's not getting out. Like, she's done everything. I wrote a letter to blank yesterday, no reply. She visited the military in Managua today, nothing. Another rep at the embassy has been contacted, nothing. She's going to call Grenada again tomorrow to see if the official is available, but I'm not crossing my fingers. She just keeps saying how inhumane the Nicaragua justice system is. So at this point, things were happening. My lawyer was trying things. I wasn't even getting all the updates, but Harrison's dad was very much in the loop, and she was trying what she could, but things were not going anywhere, and my hope was going down. Okay, so day 26, the bleeding had not stopped. It had not slowed down. At this point, if Remicade were working, it should have at least started slowing down the bleeding, and nothing was happening. And this is the first point in time that I was strongly considering surgery. Now, when I did the move from Canada and decided to go off my meds in the first place, I was very much aware of the risks. And even when I was on Remicade, when I was in Canada, I always knew that I never wanted to stay on this drug long-term because of the risks. I always knew that. I always knew that surgery might be in my future. I actually had a consult with a doctor here in Canada before I left for Nicaragua about what that would look like. So the thought of surgery didn't scare me that much. Of course, I was continually hopeful that my husband would get out and that my flare would calm down and I would go back to being in great health. But this is the first point where I realized that this isn't happening and that Remicade is not working. My gastroenterologist at this point was very much wanting to save my colon. She was not for surgery. She was very hopeful that I could get through this with different medications. She was talking about other medications as well, and just was not on board at this point for surgery. Michelle, the lawyer, went to Grenada that day to see that official, and they told her the same thing, that this person wasn't available and to try again next week. And when I heard that, I was just like, why are we waiting? Why are we going to wait a whole nother week? I was distraught and not understanding and very much not wanting to wait a week. Sorry, the notes are all over the place because I'm jumping back and forth between stuff with my health and then stuff with Harrison in jail and then stuff with my kids, and it's just like none of the notes, you know, connect to each other. So that's just kind of how the story is probably going to play out for the next little while. At this point, I was stressing about my kids because the flights had been booked. However, they didn't know yet that they were going back to Canada. I wanted to be the one to tell them in person. So my mother-in-law made arrangements with my father-in-law to bring the kids to the hospital that Saturday so that I could tell them in person. Friday, day 27, was the day that my gastroenterologist agreed that surgery was probably going to be the only option, just based on the amount of bleeding that was happening and the fact that it was not stopping. So the colorectal surgeon came to see me that day, and he brought 2 other teammates with them as well. Basically, he was giving me 2 options for surgery, and he was saying the one that was recognized internationally as the standard in this particular case was to go in and remove my colon and create an ostomy on the outside, so an ostomy with like a stoma with a bag. And in that surgery at the same time, take part of my small intestine and create what's called a J pouch. And again, like I want to explain what's happening, but I also don't feel like I need to really get into the details of all the surgeries. But basically it's creating a temporary internal pouch during that surgery at the same time. And that then I would be using an ostomy bag while this internal pouch healed. And after that, I would have a secondary surgery where they'd be able to remove the ostomy bag and reconnect me basically so that I could start using that internal pouch that was created instead. So that pouch and that surgery is called a J pouch, and I was familiar with it, again, because I'd already consulted with a doctor in Canada. The second option was to create the ileostomy, so the bag on the outside, the stoma, and have it be permanent. So not create the internal J pouch, just create the ostomy on the outside, and that I would be living with the bag for the rest of my life. Now, when he was talking to me, I was pretty sure at this point that I wanted the J pouch surgery because I knew when I had that consult in Canada that that was an option, and obviously living without an ostomy bag would be best case scenario in my eyes, and that's what I was hoping. So I had lots of questions for him about that. And that's at that point that he was letting me know that he does this J pouch surgery very infrequently, because like I said, Crohn's and colitis is just not that common in Nicaragua. And even though he's the top colorectal surgeon in Nicaragua, which gave me a lot of confidence, I asked him how often does he do a surgery like this, and he told me maybe once every 2 years. And when I heard that, my opinion changed and it made me extremely nervous. He said he wanted to do another colonoscopy on the Monday, and that I could make my final decision after that point as to which surgery I wanted to have. At this point, I was pretty confident that I knew I wanted surgery. Remicade was not working, and even if it had worked, at this point I couldn't afford how much it was going to be on a bi-weekly basis. And I also knew I just didn't want to be on Remicade long term. So I was confident that I wanted surgery, but I felt very underprepared to make the decision on J-pouch versus permanent ostomy in such a short period of time, when I was also so ill, and my brain at this point, because I wasn't eating and I was bleeding actively, like my brain, it just wasn't working well. Like it was hard to send text messages. It was hard to have a phone call. Like any amount of thinking was difficult at this point. And yeah, I had to make this like life-altering decision within a couple days as to what surgery to have. I remember messaging a friend back in Canada who's a nurse and asking if she had any advice for me. Her mom is also a nurse as well, and her mom ended up talking to a gastroenterologist. And their advice was basically like, if there's any way you can get back to Canada to have this surgery, that would be your best option. And unfortunately, that was absolutely not an option. I didn't have any sort of medical insurance that could cover a flight. I was also in no state to be able to fly. I was comfortable at the hospital I was at. It's just that I was nervous about the fact that he didn't do this surgery very often. This is the day where I also got to have a phone call with Harrison from jail. So my father-in-law had been filling him in on, you know, how I'm doing in the hospital. And through the help of Greg, his cellmate, they were able to talk to the police officers and tell them that I'm possibly heading into surgery, and if there's any way we can have a phone call. And I got to have a phone call with him, and I just cried. I was trying to get out the words, but also crying at the same time. And I remember being very loud. They had him on speakerphone, so like anybody in the room was hearing the call as well. But I was explaining to him that what was happening with me, and that I needed to make a decision, and that I wanted his opinion. I also told him that the kids would be flying back to Canada, which shocked him, and you know, he was grateful that they were going to be with family back in Canada, but it was also shocking for him to hear. And I told him that they would be coming to the hospital next day so that I could tell them in person. Okay, Saturday, day 28 is the day that my children arrived at the hospital. Again, I think I've blocked out part of these memories as well, but it was really good to see them. It was really emotional to see them. And in the end, I decided to talk to them one-on-one in the room and to tell them about Canada, because I knew that they would all react a little bit differently. And I just wanted to have that time with them to talk them through why they were leaving, and that they were going to have a great time in Canada, and that their dad was going to get out of jail, and that I was going to be okay. I think I told them about the surgery at this point. And I was talking to them about what to pack, because of course I wasn't going to be there with them to pack anything, and who they'd be staying with in Canada, because they were going to be split between my mom's house and my sister's house, and the fact that they were flying that first leg by themselves. So yeah, I got to talk to them. At first they were not happy about it, but in the end, you know, I was talking to them about the fun things they could do in Canada, and that we would all be back together again soon. So it went as well as it could have. The rest of that day I just spent trying to research as best I could on which surgery I wanted to have, and I was looking at the risks of J-pouch, and that's when I was learning, you know, more about some of the complications that can arise with having a J-pouch surgery, and the fact that the J-pouch itself can get pouchitis, which is kind of like a flare-up like colitis, and that it would be a multiple part surgery, and that they don't always work out. Obviously they do in some situations, but there is that risk that the J-pouch fails and that you would end up with an ostomy anyways. And just the amount of recovery after a J-pouch surgery and how long it takes your body to learn to use this J-pouch, and just everything. I was trying to learn as much as I could. Okay, day 29 was Sunday, and it was a text update to my friend. I'll read some of it. I'll do a text update. Just started colon prep. Liquid colonoscopy is tomorrow at 10 a.m. That was awful. To have to go through that yet again was absolutely awful. My hemoglobin and protein is low, and I developed a cough. I had an x-ray and cough medicine. So I developed a cough in the hospital, and that comes up later on, but that was not good. So, but if my stats don't improve, they may delay surgery. So because I had this cough and my hemoglobin was low, we weren't sure if surgery was going to happen in the time frame they had told me at this point. I'm still trying to decide which surgery to do. I'm doing a lot of research. I'm currently leaning toward the permanent ostomy because the J-pouch can have so many risks. However, I'm also not mentally ready to commit to an ostomy bag for life. So I don't know my decision, but I hope I figure it out soon. I received a letter from Harrison this morning asking me to get Brian to write a request to the police chief for him to say goodbye to the kids tomorrow and to call me. Brian dropped off the letter. I'm the contact on the letter. I'm hoping that the police chief doesn't call during my colonoscopy. This is going to be a major week. I have a good feeling about Harrison though, and I'm hanging on to that. I'm going to be emailing this government person again tomorrow. And then the last part of my text message was later on that day after she had sent me an email. So my friend, this is a really difficult topic to discuss, and I questioned whether or not to discuss this in these YouTube videos. However, my friend and all my friends back in Canada, knowing just how much we were going through and how much the costs of things were adding up, suggested to me that we start a GoFundMe. And this was weeks ago in the story. And I immediately was like, no, absolutely not. I don't want to start a GoFundMe. I was worried about the story getting out there first and foremost. I wasn't sure how that would affect my husband being in jail. If anyone in Nicaragua caught wind of the story, I wasn't sure if the media was going to pick up on the story if we started a GoFundMe, which is going to come up again later in this story. Everything scared me. And also I wasn't sure of people's opinions and people's comments. And I really just wanted to deal with this on our own and didn't want to put ourselves out there like that. I mean, I hadn't even been posting on social media at this point. Like, I hadn't posted on YouTube in almost 3 years. I wasn't using my social media. I was just really enjoying not being on social media and thinking of blasting our family's story and putting our faces out there. And there was just so many reasons why I wasn't wanting to do a GoFundMe. However, this is the day where she sent me an email where her and some of my other friends had wrote me basically a GoFundMe page, not like a public one, like what they would post as a GoFundMe page if I gave the go ahead. And it was written with us all anonymously, like it had, because again, she knew that I didn't want to be online. Like I wasn't in a position to deal with any kind of feedback at this point. And so she had used a photo of us and put like little emoji pictures over our faces and used different names and different locations even. It didn't list Nicaragua at all. And just the letter, like the GoFundMe page, was the most heartwarming. Even the email that went with the GoFundMe page just brought me to tears. Like that my friends took the time to do that and cared about our family as much as they did. And it was really emotional. I remember asking my mom about the GoFundMe and her thoughts, and my mother-in-law as well. At this point, my mom was beginning to need to fund everything that was happening because we had run out of funds, and thank goodness for her. But I was saying, you know, like, should we do this as a way to help recoup some of these funds? And she was saying, you know, if you put up a GoFundMe that it's anonymous, I don't even think their GoFundMe is going to let you put up an anonymous GoFundMe, and who's going to support a GoFundMe when it's anonymous. And basically in the end that day, I thanked them profusely, but I just was not ready to do a GoFundMe. Later on in this story, we did end up doing a GoFundMe. I will post it down below in case anybody is interested. Again, I feel really awkward and uncomfortable about this, but I do want to post it. Just know that the target amount on that GoFundMe is about half the amount that this whole ordeal ended up costing. Okay, day 30 was my second colonoscopy, and I remember there were so many people in the room for this colonoscopy, and I remember waking up even before I got out of the procedure room itself. Like, I was so motivated when I woke up because I knew that at that point in time, my children were at the jail with my husband because of the letter that my neighbor had wrote. I knew that they were visiting with him and that he would be calling me after this. So I was just such in a rush to get back awake and back to my room so that if he called, I didn't miss the call. My colonoscopy showed continued active bleeding and ulcers, and it was at this point in time that I had made the final decision that I wanted the permanent ostomy bag, that I didn't want to go the J-pouch route. And again, I feel like this whole surgery side of things could be like a whole video on its own in case anybody's interested, because I'm skipping over a lot of details, but the main details are I made the decision in the end that I wanted the permanent ostomy. This is also the point in time when I found out that there are no ostomy nurses or ostomy clinics in Nicaragua. So here in Canada, there are both of those things. And so you can order supplies really easily. You can pick them up in store. You can meet with specific nurses that can teach you how to use your bag and all of these different things. These did not exist in Nicaragua. And I was going to have to import all of my ostomy supplies on Amazon. Now, if you've watched any of my videos before, you'll know that you can buy things on Amazon in Nicaragua, but it takes time. The fastest that I've been able to get anything into Nicaragua is 2 weeks start to finish. So this was the day before my surgery, and this is when I was realizing that I needed to order these supplies right away. I actually had a friend in Canada who used to work at an ostomy supply clinic, and so I ended up reaching out to her because, again, I didn't have any training. I didn't know what to order besides just an ostomy bag. I knew there was more to it, and there's so many different ostomy products and ostomy bags out there. I didn't even know where to start. And she knew my story because I was keeping her in the loop as well. And I just said, I need help. Can you please create a list of what should be ordered on Amazon? Because again, at this point, my brain was, I had just gone through a colonoscopy and a prep, and my brain was not working, and I needed her help. And she created a list of supplies that I needed, which I ended up sending to a friend, a local friend in Nicaragua who has ordered things through Amazon before. And I sent the supply list to her and asked if she could get it ordered for me because it was just one less thing for my brain to have to do right before surgery. But at this point, I had been waiting all day for my husband to call. He never ended up calling when the kids visited him, and I was losing hope that the police were going to let him call that day. But I was just needing to speak to him more than ever because I knew that surgery was the next day, and I just needed to hear his voice, and luckily he did call. I'll read some of the texts I sent to my friend. I just spoke with Harrison. I bawled my eyes out, crapped myself, and had to be put on painkillers and Ativan, but I'm doing better now. I'm so grateful I got to speak to him. I love him so much. It hurts. He's doing well. He supports my surgery decision. We also spoke about the GoFundMe and that he doesn't feel comfortable going public just yet for a variety of reasons, same with myself, but that he did support that in the future. So yeah, this video is probably longer than normal, but I wanted to get through everything leading up to the surgery the next day, and I will come back for that next part.